Here's Brody Brazil.
Within the next week, I'm going to turn 40 years old. Now, you'd think the more I say that out loud, right? Like here on a YouTube video, in fact, even recording it, the more it might feel normal and natural. But I'm here to tell you, just looking at those numbers, 40, I'm not there yet. Still doesn't feel entirely right, although it's true. So on that note, I want to share 10 thoughts, 10 things, 10 perspectives about turning 40. Now that I'm on the doorstep of a milestone of life. Number one is that external perception that I have of 40-year-olds is so much different versus the internal realization. What am I talking about? How do I view a different 40-year-old man or woman? They're not young. They're mature. They're midlife, if that's what you want to call it. But that's different from me because I still feel young. I associate myself with being a young person, like physically, mentally, how I live my daily life. And to me, 27 doesn't feel that long ago. But I was 27 in 2008. And that's been quite a while ago now. That's a decent chunk of years ago. So getting over this, realizing that it's happening regardless, altering my perception to my realization, to my actuality, those are all alignments that have to take place. And I think that's why most people, honestly, struggle with the realization of turning 40. Number two is that you instantly start judging yourself turning 40 against a certain timeline. And I don't know if this timeline's unique for everybody, if there are common things that we judge ourselves on, but you start wondering questions like, have I lived enough yet? I don't mean quantity of days, I mean like quality of life. Have you accomplished enough things with your life? What's the trajectory of your life? Where are things going in the near and distant future? What's the balance of your life? Work versus family versus friends versus fun. There's a lot of pieces of the pie. And look, for anybody and everybody, is it ever going to be perfect? Is anybody going to say, I have this thing nailed, I am just where I want to be? No. Everybody's going to overthink all of this. And it is a time for introspection, right? You're apparently at the middle of your life. For me, I hope numerically it's not the middle point. I hope I can live a little bit longer than 80. But you understand with the general theme of being at this junction, why you'd start to reconsider everything. And where will I be at 80? What are the next 40 years going to look like? Point number three here is that your decade themes become a lot more clear in reverse. Like individually, you realize what your teens, your 20s, your 30s were all about. They're just a lot easier to define and distinguish between here as you approach 40. Like, for example, me personally, in your teenage years, you are still learning everything. As much as you want to be your own individual, your own separate person, your parents, your relatives, your friends, they are all making a great impression on who you are and who you are about to become. You're very dependent on other people in your teenage years, even though you really are aspiring for that independence. You can't wait to get that driver's license. You can't wait to vote. And in a couple of years, drink your first legal beverage. Like you're just craving that individual attention and opportunity. But you're not there yet, which is so different from your 20s where all of a sudden you're doing things on your own. You're like, I wasn't ready for this. I didn't know this was going to happen. And you're finding success as well too, but making mistakes, I think, is a huge part of your 20s. Learning from them, figuring out what you did wrong, how to do better next time, how to not repeat them. I think as much as success might be enjoyable, making mistakes in your 20s is actually what's most rewarding. And then in your 30s, at least for me, it was all about settling into a marriage, becoming a father of a child and a dog, becoming a homeowner on 2 separate occasions, realizing that your career is probably going to be this one for several decades to come. So a lot of settling in, which now brings me to what the heck is the theme of my 40s? I don't know yet, because it wouldn't have been fair for me at 29 to try and guess what 37 was going to be like. So why am I here at 39 trying to guess like I know what anything in the 40s are going to be like. Yeah, life is a lot easier in reverse, but especially the decades are easier to see as you hit 40. But overall, point number 4 here, decades in general are more clear to see here in reverse. And I'm talking about the decades you've lived through. Like for me, born in 1981, I remember a lot of the late 80s, as well as the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and now here we are in very different times of 2021. But to be able to see decade upon decade gives you, I think, a greater understanding of life, where society has been, how things have changed in a multitude of different ways. Technology, lifestyle, just day-to-day life. Happiness has changed. Expectations have changed over all these years. And I'd like to think that people have improved, generally speaking, over these decades. But they're a lot more clear and easy to see once you have more than just 1 or 2 decades under your belt. And I do have to remember sometimes when I'm talking to a 24-year-old, they don't remember the 80s. They don't remember the 90s, essentially. So that's me. How about a person who was born in the 40s or 50s? Like, they have a lot more experience to draw from. So just to kind of understand that when you hit 40, you're really starting to accumulate more decades of life experience and a better understanding of the bigger picture. Perspective here, number 5, I understand why some people have a midlife crisis. Never understood it before. Now that I'm here, I get it. Like bucket list items start emerging. Going back to that timeline that you start judging yourself against. Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough fun things, right things, stuff I want to do, stuff I've always put off? And now I'm realizing that in the back of my mind, that little clock is ticking. I understand why you might be secure a little bit in your financials, and all of a sudden you make a big purchase, one that you normally never would have gone for. A car, a boat, a vacation house, something extravagant. And it might be tight. Like, it may not be your most prudent financial decision, but you weigh it against the old comment of a 20-year-old. YOLO. What? You only live once. 20-year-olds say that. And now here you are at 40, kind of with that same perspective. Career changes. You've always been doing something that it's okay and it treats you well financially. I understand now why people leave that career, maybe even take less money to do something they love, or do something that's a passion, or do something that they've always wanted to do. And that is kind of the last thing here. How many wants do you take care of versus how many needs do you take care of? It can't be one or the other entirely. You can't just be doing all things that you need to do, because then you're not having fun, you're not enjoying life, you're not feeling great about it. But if you're only doing things that you want to do and nothing that you need to do, then you're probably not going to have a responsible outcome of your life. You're probably going to be put in some very difficult spots. So the wants and the needs definitely have to be balanced. Point number 6, you can't cheat your body anymore. What's that old expression? You're writing checks that your body can't cash. It's not to say that I'm physically going to decline in the next 10 years. I hope not. But you can't cheat your body anymore like you used to. Like when you were 22. In terms of alcohol or drugs, or I should have put just food on here. Can't eat the same way that you used to. Your metabolism is definitely not the same. And that's not, again, that's not an overnight thing, but it is a realization here as you change decades. Getting more sleep has to be a priority. Exercise, fitness, mental health, and stress. We could all do better in that area. But yeah, you can't do your body probably like you have been for at least the last decade or two. So that has to change, and you have to be a little bit more selfish, I think, entering 40, how you treat your body. Number 7, there's a lot that I cannot even remember clearly about being 20. I remember the decade, I can define it generally, but I'm not talking about big memories. I'm talking about all the in-between stuff, maybe less important aspects of life. What was that person's name? Or did I meet that person in high school or college? Where did I work with that person again? What happened that one night? It's not all clear. There's a big confusion and blurring of things together that you don't realize when you're 20, because it just happened in your 20s. You don't realize in your 30s, because it might have only been a decade or two ago, but in your 40s, you're getting farther away from things, and it makes me wonder, like, what will 60 and 80 be like? Will I remember making this YouTube video when I'm 62? Will it still be online? That's another great question. Because number 8, I mean, the 30s were pretty damn busy for me. And I went through a lot, in terms of change. From a single person to somebody who's married to being a father, like I said before, of a child and a dog. Responsible for dependents and lives and other people. And you start thinking about your own family and taking care of them as well, too. And at the same respect, you're all of a sudden very serious about your career, managing it, making sure you're taking the right steps, making smart decisions financially, saving up. And yeah, the 30s were kind of exhausting. Lucrative, like, don't get me wrong, like, a lot of really good things happened. But that's, I think, part of the intimidation of turning 40 is that you just went through a lot. Most people went through so much in their 30s, they're imagining, like, what is the next decade going to bring? You're feeling like this is a ladder, step up, 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 up. And you might be a little intimidated about thinking about 10 years as a whole based on the last 10 years that you've just lived through. That brings me to point number 9. About your 40s, they're not what they used to be. I really do feel like the expectations of 40 have shifted. The reality of being 40 has shifted. Yeah, you're not young, but it doesn't mean you're old. I would hope now that people in their 40s here in the 2020s know how to live a better life than people of their 40s in even the 1980s when I was born. I think it's a lot easier now to defy age stereotypes, just taking care of yourself with the medical advancements, with science, with a lot more that we know now that we didn't back in the 80s. And then there's that comment about being past your prime. I saw the other day on social media that, by the way, as I watch this when I'm 62, does social media still exist? I saw an article that said most people feel like at 37, you're at your prime. But what is the prime? Because if you're asking me prime physically, I'm pretty sure I left that like about 12 to 15 years ago. And it's not an overnight sharp, decline. There's kind of a big curve, and you start not feeling the same and not as young and youthful as you once were. But physically, we're talking about prime. How about mentally? How about just being a good human being? I'd like to think that mentally, I'm nowhere close to my prime. And I'd like to think in terms of actually being a good member of society, that I'm nowhere close to peaking yet. I would hope there's a lot of room for improvement. And that is my last point here, is that constant evolution and improvement should be your ultimate goal. This should be everybody's end game once they hit 40. Because I can understand why 40 and hitting this age is an easy stopping point. You're married, you're in your career, you have kids, you're tied into so many things, and you just say, you know what, I don't care about staying in shape, I don't care about this or that. It's so easy to be in tunnel vision, to get comfortable and to not want a lot of things to change. You just stop. You quit on a lot of things. Quit putting effort into these things. But I really feel like it's the sports analogy. Like a team has a lead on the scoreboard. Well, how do you keep that lead for the rest of the game? You know what you do? You keep doing the things that got you that lead. You don't take your foot off the gas pedal, as they say. So what does that mean here in the second half of life? It means to continue challenging your thinking. Challenge your achievements. Keep taking that bar and setting it higher and higher. This is the mental side and the mental growth and development of being a human. Challenge yourself. Don't stop. This is an easy point to take a break, sit on that bench, and knock it up and finish running the race. I want to keep running the race. Because if you're going over the hill, if turning 40 is over the hill, then doesn't that mean you're at the top of the hill at 40? And you should have a pretty clear view of everything else out there that you've ascended to? Because that's the way I'm going to take it, is that I don't want to stop evolving. I don't want to stop growing, maturing, and challenging myself for however many more years I'm fortunate enough to live. So 40, yes, intimidating, monumental, milestone for sure, but I'm going to run with it. I hope you do too.